Welcome to the 26th reading of my memoir, The Innocence of Guilt. Back in town. Thomas Wolfe, the writer, coined the phrase, "You can't go home again." But in June of 1955, as soon as I saw our old house, 16 West Stockwell Street, almost at the bottom of the hill, climbed out of the back of the removal van and trod up the old worn steps with the iron railings still missing from the war years, my earlier childhood, for all its failings and disappointments, came rushing at me in a surge of emotion. Such a familiarity to the long hallway, every room, every flight of stairs, the view from the attic window, that breathtaking sight of the rooftops as far as the eye could see, drew me in, captivated me. Home, as if nowhere else I'd lived in the past 4 years qualified to be called that. Drawn by nostalgia to the place of my early childhood, the place where my memories began. As the final end of the ration books the previous year filled housewives' hearts with a new sense of relief and promises of better things to come, my heart leaped with joy at having the town of Colchester spread out before me in the manner of a feast. Mum's reaction was more sober towards the old house once she took a good look around. 4 years had taken its toll on an already old building, and repairs needed doing before she would be happy about living there again. The owners of the clothing factory initially bought the 3 houses with the intention of demolishing them and extending the factory, but the local council refused planning permission because of the houses' historic value. The factory ended up building onto half of the back gardens instead, so in ours, the apple tree, flowers and grass of my earlier childhood were gone. A dirt yard remained with a chain-link fence right by the factory bike racks, where the factory workers were in sight of our lavatory only a few feet away as they showed up and left for work. The brick wall separating us from the Stockwell Arms pub next door had partially crumbled, so Dad put old boards up against it to stop Mum's dog from falling over the drop on the other side. The loss of the garden upset Mum, and she often said how much she missed her cedar bungalow at the farm. Inside, one improvement went along with modern times. DC electricity upstairs, no more need for candles, although no power points. Unfortunately, DC was being phased out, and AC coming in as the latest current, so David would not be able to have his much longed for electric train set, as all the new sets in the shops used the new current. As we couldn't have a wireless upstairs either, Dad wired a speaker up to the room David and I shared so we could listen to music before we went to sleep. He controlled what station we listened to and for how long, but we didn't dare complain in case he removed it. He installed linoleum to cover up the old floorboards so Mum didn't have to go down on her hands and knees scrubbing. A little ironic, as she ended up on her hands and knees anyway, polishing the office floors at the factory to make a little extra money. The scullery still had its cold water, old-style butler sink, but oh, the joy of clear, fresh, cold running water. I drank glass after glass, the epitome of luxury. We now paid rent to the factory owners, so we weren't legally in a tied house, but as Dad installed a gate in the chain-link fence, Mum complained that the easy access to his place of employment made it seem as if the factory owned him as much as the Mangles had at the farm. Our old neighbours still resided in their respective houses. Next door, the Sadlers with their grown-up daughter, and next door to them, the Whittons with their big family. All of us together again. but now with the huge shadow of the factory walls, with their numerous windows looming over us. Dad offered to pay me for helping him sweep the floors of the factory each night. This elated me to at last have a proper job, but it turned into a disaster. The first time I swept, I suffered a massive nosebleed, lasting all evening long. He didn't give me a second chance. I could go over there while he worked, as long as I kept out of his way. In those first few weeks, I enjoyed snooping around the workbenches where each worker kept their box of tools, going through their personal things, photographs, various clothing and shoes they kept at work. Revealed each person's personality. Male, female, married, single, children or not. I explored every inch of the factory throughout the different departments: cutting room, basting area, hand sewing area, machine area, steam room, jacket room, button room, and so on. A ghost city. All the residents mysteriously vanished, with nothing but their belongings left behind to prove they once existed. I alone moved amongst the city of the dead and uncovered their secrets. The immediate area surrounding our house hadn't changed from 4 years ago, although odd H-shaped metal constructions now appeared on some of the rooftops. For amusement, David and I took to walking the streets counting these, as every day new ones appeared. It wasn't too long before this game became far too time-consuming, as more and more families rented television sets. The rooftops became dotted with aerials pointing up into the sky, bringing the wonder of television into homes. Dad refused to rent a set, being content to listen to the wireless. In late afternoons, when programming started, David and I roamed up and down the streets, watching for the flicker of the black and white images of the sets, visible through the thin curtains of the street-level front room windows. We pressed our faces against a window to see the screen, fascinated by the sight, until someone inside noticed us and rapped at the window to chase us away. On we went to another house, only to meet the same response. We weren't fazed. Nothing could stop us seeking out for ourselves the latest technology that appeared to have reached every household but ours. The lamplighter still did his rounds. The streets wouldn't be converted to electricity until 1962. The 2 pubs still did a brisk trade, spilling out drunks every night, some far too inebriated to make their way up the hill without vomiting against the side of our steps, one of Mum's constant complaints. Living next door to a pub, and another across the road, was no joke, she told us. During the war, with my father out fire-watching and din-din out with friends, she said she'd often been in the house with my baby brother and me when the pubs closed, and faced drunks mistaking our steps for their own front entrance. One particular night, a man came and banged repeatedly on the door, waking us up. So fed up with his persistence, she opened the door and gave him a shove, causing him to fall down the stone steps and lie immobile at the bottom. She didn't check to see if he was alive or dead, but closed the door, convinced she'd solved the problem. On hearing this rather violent account, I said, "What if he was dead, Mum? What would you have done?" She replied, "I wasn't going to say anything if he was." This confession chilled me. Mum still smoked cheap woodbines, which she arranged for me to pick up from the off-license at the Nelson's Head across the street. The glamorous effect cigarettes had on popular film actresses was lost on her. It worried me the way she allowed the cigarette's ash to grow longer and longer as she prepared food in the scullery. I watched it dangling from her lips and urgently said, "Mom, the ash, it's going to drop." She ignored me, and I imagined all that ash ending up in my food. It never did, though, as she had an uncanny way of knowing when to remove it and tap it out in the sink. Smoking disgusted me, and the temptation to take it up never crossed my mind. With 3 members of my family constantly puffing away, filling the house with smoke, perhaps so much nicotine entered my lungs I didn't need to. The bakery across the street was gone, and Yvonne, my former babysitter, with it. Sadly, my surrogate grandmother, Mrs. Barnard, had passed away. Lambarn Croft had new occupants, a Jewish family with a boy and girl around my age. As much as I wanted to meet them, my mother's derogatory attitude towards them hardly gave me the courage to introduce myself. Their parents operated a stall up in the high street, and each Saturday on market day all 4 of them could be seen pushing the wheeled stall piled high with merchandise, not too much larger than Dad's homemade wooden wheelbarrow, all the way up the steep hill. I longed to find out what they sold. Mum, however, persisted in her remarks about Jews, chiefly that all they cared about was money. I wish that my parents operated a stall in the market. I imagined it would be a lot of fun, but I knew it would never happen. As far as my mother was concerned, all the market stall owners were crooks and money grabbers, and she didn't want to associate with any of them, neighbours or not. Grant's fish shop was still in business, and on Fridays for tea, Mum usually bought fish and chips wrapped up in old newspapers donated by householders to keep it hot. What a treat. Sometimes after tea time, either David or I were given the money to race down to Pyman's and buy a small block of Wall's Neapolitan ice cream wrapped in newspaper, always a good insulating material, by the shopkeeper to keep it cold, and race all the way back with it before it melted so it could be cut up into slices. We also spent our pocket money on sweets there. My favourites: pear drops, Parma violets, love hearts, aniseed balls, Roundtree's fruit gums, and the ever-popular Popeye tasty candy cigarettes with the all-important red tip at the end. So I could try to fool everyone into believing I was smoking one of those disgusting woodbines that always dangled from Mum's lips. Thank you for listening. Please feel free to subscribe, like, or comment on this reading, and hopefully you will tune in to the next one. Bye for now.